Hello, I'm Jeff Walton, and this is my video on why I think perhaps the books of Ruth and Esther and Jonah and books like these were included in the canon at all. Start by going through one by one what I think probably the main points of each book and the reasons for including each book were. First, Ruth, we get an intimate kind of a glimpse into the actual family life, a private life of an Israelite family, which is kind of contrasted to some of the things we've seen before. Kind of groups Israel as a nation as a whole. We see the idea of a remnant, which is one that's repeated throughout all of the Old Testament. The idea of the remnant being the few that are left over, left over because of their true faith and obedience to God. Get the importance of love and human relationships. Ruth and Boaz both kind of provide actual living, breathing examples of this love, self-giving love your neighbor as yourself, that God's law is required. And another thing that I think is the main point is to include all nations and all peoples, not just the Israelites in this in God's plan and in God's umbrella of mercy that He's willing to provide, as long as you obey His will and His law. So membership in His kingdom is shown to not necessarily be by birth and by blood, I guess, but by the obedience to God's will. And this book shows that God is God over all nations. God cares about all people and is willing to include all people, not just Israelites, in His kingdom and in His plan. And Esther is famously known to be a book that doesn't even include a mention of the word God, but of course through this book we see God's hand in the preserving of His people very clearly. The theme of a remnant is again repeated in this book. The Israelites are set to be completely wiped out, and God intervenes, but it also shows the importance, just like Ruth did, the importance and necessity of individuals living and acting in accordance to the obedience to God's law, whereas Ruth and Boaz lived this way and thus improved and spared the life of Naomi. So Esther, by her decision to step up and do what God has called her to do, or to do the right thing, or do what is in accordance with God's law, she also is God's instrument, being used by Him to spare this remnant and to preserve the nation of Israel. So this theme of the individual action, I think, is the main thing that stems throughout these three books. Going into Jonah, of course, God shows again how He works through people being in obedience to Him. And of course Jonah is initially not obedient, and that's the famous great fish story where He brings him back. My face is not moving, and I'm not sure if it's recording me right now or not. And we're back. But again, the idea of the importance of individuals. These books give an example of individuals living their lives and their family lives and their individual lives in obedience to and or in disobedience to God's law and God's will, and it shows the consequences of that, but mostly the importance of showing how God works through people. And we have a choice to be obedient and to be used and participate in His kingdom and in His will for this world, or we can be disobedient. But I think these books show that God is the God over all the world, not just the Israelite people, and that He works through individuals, that He cares not just for nations and countries, but for people as well, and He can do His work, will do His work, but He will do it through the workings of these individual people. So I think that's the main thing I get out of these books. Why the church decided to include them in the canon, I think, was probably had a lot to do with the other theme I saw, which was God being God over everyone, and including everyone, not just the Israelite people, but extending His law and His mercy and His acceptance and His kingdom to the whole world through the Israelite people, not just to the Israelite people. So those two things, that the way God works through individuals and the God's sovereignty over and love for the whole world, I believe, were the reasons. If I were on the committee, I would have voted to accept these books into the canon because of the lessons we learn from them about ourselves and the things we learn about God through them. Thank you.